Welcome to chapter 3 of the book of 2Chronicles. It begins with Solomon again, and he began to build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah. Moriah is in Greek. This is the only place it mentions this name. It's thought to be the same place that was in Genesis 22:2, where Abraham was to offer up Isaac. So Solomon began to build the house in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, of which the Lord appeared to David his father in the place which David prepared on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And we can go to 24:18 of 2 Samuel, and it says, "And Gad the prophet came to David in that day and said to him, Ascend and set up the altar to the Lord in the threshing floor of Aruna in Samuel is called, the Jebusite. And David ascended according to the word of Gad the prophet, in which manner the Lord gave charge to him. And Aruna looked, and he beheld the king and his servants coming near unto him." He's a Jebusite, so he's not a Jew. And he probably could be afraid when he sees all these people coming. And Aruna went forth and did obeisance to the king upon his face upon the ground. Here it is, obeisance of face on the ground. And this was translated into worship, the King James, and has nothing to do with playing musical instruments or singing. We've lost that meaning completely, which is sad. And Aruna said, for what reason comes my master, the king, to his bondman? And there is Kyrios mu. Kyrios here is master. If it was Yahweh, Kyrios for Yahweh would have been all capital Lord, L-O-R-D, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. But here it's my master, the king, to his bondman. And David said, so now he's putting himself into bondage, figuratively probably, to David as he's a servant or a subject of the king. And David said, to acquire from you the threshing floor to build an altar to the Lord, so that the devastation upon the people should be constrained, as David was going to take a census of the people, and when God saw this, he gave him a choice of either the angel devastating the people or the enemies and so forth. And David chose the angel, and the angel is sending this devastation. And so here, this is a way to stop the devastation. And Aruna said to David, take it and offer him, O my Lord, O my master, the king, to the Lord what is good in your eyes. Behold, the oxen are for a whole burnt offering, and the wheels and the items of the oxen are for wood. So this was a place that they were grinding wheat or some sort of grain. Oxen were pulling this big wheel that may have been 10 feet tall and a couple of feet thick, made out of stone, crushing the wheat. And here he's saying, here, take all of this and use it for the offering to the Lord. And the whole amount Aruna gave to the king. And Aruna said to the king, the Lord your God, may he bless you. And the king said to Aruna, not so, but only by acquiring shall I acquire it from you for a price. For I shall not offer to the Lord my God a whole burnt offering without paying a charge. This is some way of David setting a precedent that when we do things for the Lord, it shouldn't be something that we casting away or we would give away to Goodwill or Salvation Army and think we're giving to the Lord. No, it should be the best. We should be giving up something to do that, money or whatever. And David acquired the threshing floor and the oxen. Now the threshing floor and the oxen with 50 shekels of silver. Now in 1 Chronicles it mentions a much larger amount of gold. but that could have been for the land, and the 50 shekels could have been here just for the oxen. And David built there an altar to the Lord and offered whole burnt offerings and peace offerings. And the Lord heeded the land and held up the devastation on top of Israel. So here we are now having Solomon to build the temple in this place from Ornan, the Jebusite. And he began to build in the second month, in the 4th year of his kingdom. And with these, Solomon began to build the house of God. The length of the first measurement was 60 cubits, and the breadth 20 cubits. So we have it 60 by 20. Now in Moses, the tabernacle was 20 by 20. And then later in Zerubbabel's temple, which is being rebuilt during the time of Zechariah and Nehemiah, it's the same dimension as Solomon's temple. Was probably built on maybe some of the same foundation. Then in Ezekiel's temple, I think it was also in the same. And then there's a temple in Revelation which doesn't give the dimensions. And the column porch before the face of the house, its length upon the face of the width of the house was 20 cubits, and the height was 120 cubits. And he gilded it inside in pure gold. So the house had a porch out in the front. There's a lot of pictures of what it could have looked like on the internet. You can go and look at the temple in Jerusalem, and you'll see what it possibly could have looked like from people's ideas of these dimensions and everything. And some of them are very interesting, very accurate, down to the number of posts that made up the tabernacle and so forth. And the great house he boarded with woods of cedar. We mentioned before Xelis, a xylophone, and Kedrenes, Kedr, cedar, derivative, and gilded it in pure gold. Cresio, we have the chrysanthemum plant or derivatives, and carved upon it Phoenix, Phoenix, the city of Phoenix in the United States and the state of Arizona, means a palm, city of palms, and a chain work that was hanging down. And he adorned the house with valuable stones for glory. Not exactly what type of stones, or maybe carved stones, and could have been smaller valuable stones, or a combination of both. And they were adorning the house. And the gold was gold from out of Parvaim. Now we don't know where Parvaim is. The only place it's mentioned in the Bible is here. So we'll just leave that up to some place that had gold. And he gilded the house, covered it with gold inside, and its walls, and the gatehouses, and the roofing, and the doorways, that's probably all inside, with gold. And he carved cherubim upon the walls, some type of a bas relief, as they call it, where it's carved into the wood. And he made the house of the Holy of the Holies. Its length upon the face of the width of the house was 20 cubits, and the breadth was 20 cubits. So this was the same size as the tabernacle in the Old Testament, but here we have a larger building, but then the Holy of Holies was the same, 20 by 20. And he gilded it in pure gold, amounting to 600 talents. And I should have put down what the equivalent of a talent was. It was quite it seems like a talent is 100 pounds. So I'm pretty sure it is 100 pounds. If that's the case, then 600 times 100 would be what? 600,000 pounds? I'm not sure. And the scale weight of the nails, the scale weight of the one was 50 shekels of gold. And again, I didn't write down what this weight would be the equivalent of, but it's quite a bit. And the upper room he gilded in gold. So all this gold. And he made in the house, in the Holy of Holies, 2 cherubim, a work from out of incorruptible wood. So these cherubim had the wings and feet and so forth. They were made from out of wood, and then and they gilded them in gold, and the wings touched the sides of the room. 20 feet was the expanse of their wings, for the 4 wings. And the wings of the cherubim, the length was 20 cubits, and to the one wing was 5 cubits, touching the wall of the house. And the other cherub, and the other wing was 5 cubits, touching the wing of the other cherub. So they were touching each other, side by side, or maybe front by. I don't know. People have different ideas on what this looked like. You can look at the pictures on. Go to search on Google and look up the cherubim. And the wings, the petriges, we have helicopter, the peta has to do with a wing. The wings of these hierovim, which is a transliteration from the Greek into English, being open and spread out, was 20 cubits. So they were open in the wings, and they spread them out, and they encompassed or crossed the room. And these stood upon their feet, and their faces were as towards the house. So they were beings that did have feet, and they had faces, and the wings spread out. Now the faces were towards the house. I'm not exactly sure what that means, because they were inside the house, probably towards the front, which would be the open part of the house, where the veil covered the opening. And he made a veil from out of blue and purple and scarlet and of linen, and wove cherubim in it. Must have been a gorgeous veil, and it hung from the ceiling on down. And he made in front of the house 2 columns. Now this was all the work. These columns were done by Hiram, the man from earlier that we mentioned in the last chapter, that came from Tyre, who was from Dan, half Jewish and half Tyrian. Then they made these columns 35 cubits in height. They were huge, and their capitals were 5 cubits. And a cubit is 18 cubits. There were 18 cubits high. I'm not sure what I wrote down here for a note. I'm not sure. But anyway, these capitals were large columns, and on the top of the columns were large, and on top of the columns were capitals that made it look nice when it hit the ceiling instead of just this round column hitting it. Gave it a little bit of adornment. And they were also made out of bronze, and they were cast in the ground. I mentioned someplace, and I think it was in eastern part of Israel, where they had hard clay, and they dug it out and made it look the best they could. Poured this hot molten bronze in there and waited until it cooled off. It may have been days, and pulled it out and cleaned it up. And then they probably did 4 of them. They probably had all 4, and then they probably brought them together, and they're hollow inside. And he made chain work in the dabir, and the dabir is he made an oracle, and put them on the tops of the columns, so some type of a chain work, decorative. And he made 100 figures of pomegranates. And these pomegranates were little round red apple-like pieces of, I guess they're fruit. And he put them upon the chain work. So they're hanging, and I believe they also had little pomegranates, if I'm not mistaken, on the fringe of their garments and bells. The priest had the bells, but people, I think they had little pomegranates on there. I'm not sure. Maybe it was just the chief priest. But and he set the columns at the front of the temple, one at the right and one at the left. And he called the name of the one at the right Success. And success is a Greek, katorthosis. But in the Hebrew, it was Jachin, Jachin in English. And the name of the one from the left was iskis, strength in Greek. And in Hebrew, it was Boaz, Jachin and Boaz, the two columns that were in front of this temple that Solomon made. Next, we go inside of the temple, or around the temple and inside, and we see the different pieces of the temple that were used in the sacrifices and the incense burnings and so forth. That's all in chapter 4, our next chapter, and I hope you'll join us as we continue going through this temple and seeing how it's made for the first time. See you next time, and God bless.